I think the session has started. I'm just verifying on another window. All right. Hi everyone. So welcome to the Online Accounts workshop. So this is part of the Ubuntu Online Summit, and today we're going to present you the Online Accounts subsystem. It can also be considered a framework now inside Ubuntu. And for this session, I'm joined by Alberto Mardigan, the lead engineer for the online account system, and also Marcus Tomlinson, who's been designing more specifically the Scopes API for integrating your scope with online accounts. So we have a quick presentation, and throughout this presentation, I hope we'll get questions and remarks. We'll be monitoring the IRC channel, which is Ubuntu-UDS AppDev2, so see you there. If you also want to join this Hangout, feel free to do so. It should be open to everyone, and so we invite you there if you want to interact more directly with us. Without further ado, I'll get started with the presentation and give you the floor, Alberto.
Okay. Hello everyone. So are you sharing the slides, David, already? Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So we had a session, if I remember correctly, at the last Ubuntu Online Summit already about online accounts. So here I will just quickly go through the old things, and we have also some new content, and maybe we can spend some more time on that, especially because that's about scopes, and we have this scope competition, so I guess it makes more sense to spend time on that. But anyway, let's start with a small introduction of online accounts. We have
just let me know, when you want me to.
You can move to the next one.
There you go.
Okay, this is a fancy drawing of online accounts. So online accounts is basically a system for managing your online identities, like your Google account, your Facebook account, and so on. It is tightly bound to the applications. So one of the goals is to make life easier for application developers, so that they don't have to worry about all the authentication process, like in the case of OAuth, for instance. This is quite complicated because it also involves opening a web view. So the application developer just takes care of setting up the authentication, like giving the necessary parameters like the application keys, and then online accounts does all the rest and returns either a password or authentication token, whatever whatever fits the account. And okay, so I'm starting like from the bottom left. So it is these applications can be desktop applications, like in the Unity 7 X11 sense, so they are mostly unconfined by AppArmor, and they can basically use all the accounts which are present on the system. Instead, on the phone, well, let's say on Ubuntu Touch, we have application confinement, and that affects both applications and scopes. And for online accounts, scopes are just another type of application. It doesn't really make a distinction between them. It's just up to the developer, which we have client APIs that are a bit different, but there is not a difference in how they are handled. And also, online accounts aims to make life easier for end users, because it caches the authentication, the session. So if you have, like, for example, 4 applications using your Google account, then you don't have to log in 4 times you just log in once, and if the session is still valid, like you can authorize, you just have to authorize all 4 applications, but the login phase, like the phase where you enter your username and password, that should happen only once. And then, well, it's also a framework for service providers in the sense that they can extend it. We have just a handful of default account providers installed on the system, just the major ones, the ones that for which we have some applications, some system applications that are using them. But otherwise, like people are free to add their own favorite services. Okay, I guess we can move on to the next slide. On this, I will be a bit quick because most of this is not that important to know. Most of the times you can just see online accounts as a black box, but it's composed of a few different pieces. So there is like the core part is probably this sign-on-D box, which is the second in the top right, and this is a debug service that runs in the background, and which just takes care of the managing the user credentials, so accessing the database of user credentials, also to start the authentication plugins like OAuth or basic password or SSL, and this is completely UI-less. It's also being used in other platforms. And then we have the so-called sign-on UI, which is the UI process, which is user visible. And one way to see it is to go to the system settings, tap on account, and start the account creation. And another way where it can appear is when applications are requesting access to an account. So there we have a dialog popping up that asks the user, do you want to authorize this application to access this account, and so on. And then part of the framework is also the online plugins, which can be third-party plugins or already pre-installed in the system, and they support, like they bring support to the services. Like there is a online account plugin for Google, one for Facebook, and so on. Okay, I guess.
So nice technology, and now that we've seen the menu, you're going to dive into the various parts.
Yes, so let's see what bindings we have for application developers. We actually have many bindings for different technologies, but what we recommend for application developers is the QML bindings. But first, let's see how to. There are some basic steps that, regardless of what bindings you're going to use, the application developer needs to take. And it is about shipping a couple of files, one .service file, one .application file, which basically describe how the application is using the account, the online account framework. So first, let's see, the .service file describes a service. The important bits here are the provider element that says what is the account provider. Like in this example here, we have Facebook. So this application is going to use the Facebook account. And then we have in that template element, we have all the authentication settings that are needed for this application. Most of the times for OAuth, since Facebook is OAuth 2.0, we have the scopes and the application key, client ID. Depending on the authentication method, there can be different parameters, different keys. We have just put online some documentation about it. At the end of the slides, if I remember correctly, we have a link to that. And Then we have the .application file instead. Tells which services your application is using. So basically, in this service element, you see the ID tag. That's the typically it's just set to the click package name underscore application name, and that instructs online accounts to look up the .service file above. So we can move on to the next slide. Of course, in order to put all these things together, they have to be added to the click manifest file, with these two hooks that are highlighted in bold. Well, it's just you specify there the path to these files. And another simple but very important thing is that you need to add this accounts permission in the AppArmor policy file. Otherwise, all accesses will be blocked and your application will fail in mysterious ways. We can move on to the next slide. Okay, so this in the QML API, one fundamental part is the application ID. Application ID is, as I said before, it's a click package name underscore application name, and by specifying this one, you instruct online account to load that application file and to find out what are the accounts and services supported by your application. So here we have this account service model class that is basically an account. It's basically a model of all the accounts which are, let's say, compatible with your application. So once you specify your application ID, then it will look for, let's consider this example here, it will look for the Facebook accounts which are enabled, which have your application enabled. Yeah, I didn't say something important, but probably if you are familiar with the Ubuntu Touch interface, you have already seen that in the system settings, when you click on accounts and you tap on one account, you see a list of applications that are authorized to use the account. So if your application is authorized, you will see the account in this model. If your application is disabled, then it will just not see the account at all. So here what we are doing in this example is that we have this account service model and then a repeater that just creates an account service for each element in the model. And this account service is a class. There is also documentation online for it. That is very useful to read the settings out of this account and to perform the authentication. So there is an authenticate method. You see I'm calling it inside this highlighted get token function. This null here, in this place you can specify additional authentication parameters in case you don't want to write them in the service file. You can write here like your application key if you want to have them in the binary. And then it just has two signals, on-authenticated and on-authentication error, that are emitted at the end of the authentication process. I mean, only one of them is emitted. And this authenticated signal carries a reply object which holds all the authentication data. So in this case, we are using the access token. And the other interesting part is this setup element. So if the account service model tells you that there is no account, an application can request an account. I mean, it needs to be done with some user interface. It's better not to do that automatically, but your user interface could have like buttons to say add Facebook account, and when it's clicked, it's called the setup.exec method. You see it's the very last line in this code snippet, which brings up the online accounts dialog, which I mentioned before, that asks the user either to create a new account if there is no account at all, or to authorize the application to use an existing one.
So maybe also it's worth mentioning that this online account UI is driven by what we call the trust session prompt, which ensures that the user can tell the difference between what is a regular application UI, typically a third-party application, and what is essentially Ubuntu asking you to authorize an application to use your identity, right? So, and that means we insist on the security of that process so that no application should try to abuse, the trust that people are putting in that.
Yeah, in the current implementation, it's the online account is sliding up from the bottom of the screen. While normally when you start an application, if I remember correctly, they sliding from the right. So there is a different UI flow, and it's quite easy to notice it.
Okay, so that's QML. HTML5, or any questions so far? Just checking IRC.
Yes, there are a couple of questions I just noticed.
Sure, yeah. So I'll let you answer.
Yes, I will.
Sure.
I will answer the second question about the repeater. So the question was, what does the repeater element mean there? It's actually the normal Qt Quick repeater. It instantiates the delegate for each row in the model. So in this case, this is like to handle multiple accounts. Suppose that your application can handle multiple Facebook accounts. You need to have multiple account services, and one way of doing that is using a repeater. Other ways would be just to use the create object method of the Qt component, QML component. I don't remember how it's called. Yeah, it's component element in QML. So it can be created dynamically, just manually, or using a repeater. Just for the sake of being more concise, I chose to use a repeater here. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. So we have about the same APIs for HTML5 JavaScript applications. I will be very quick about this. So you just initialize the library. You need to get first the Unity object, and then the Unity object exposes this online accounts object, and then it might not be necessary, but it's also possible to enumerate the providers. Suppose that your application wants to show a list of the providers that it can use. It's not the same example that we had before. Before we said that the application is using just Facebook, but suppose that your application can use Facebook and Google and something else. Then with this method, you get a list of all the providers which are application support, and you could use this list, for instance, to create buttons on the UI to suggest the creation of these accounts. Then the equivalent of the QML model is this get accounts call, which just retrieves the list of enabled accounts. And this filters parameter here, again, it's a JSON object, which with the filter properties. And most of the times you just want to have application ID set to your again the short app ID. It's like in the previous line, it's written in the get provider. You have this object here, which is application ID web browser app in this example. So something similar could be here in these filters. And then once you get these objects, each of them exposes more or less the same API that you saw in QMS. So there is the authenticate method. This time it takes a callback, and it has like either the results or an error code. Again, we also have HTML5 APIs for creating an account, the equivalent of the setup element above before. But yeah, we didn't want to dedicate another slide for that. Okay, we can move on again.
Yep. So online accounts also there is a new API for scopes. So since we've Marcus, I thought maybe Marcus can give us an overview of that part as well, right? That is, you can share the presentation together.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so from the scopes point of view, there aren't many slides, which is good because we wanted to make it as simple as possible. Scopes and apps are pretty much treated the same, as you see there, but scopes have a little bit of a more complicated life cycle, so there was a little bit more thinking that needed to go into it. So what we've done is we've wrapped up the online accounts functionality into a nice helper class in the scopes API. So first of all, on this slide, we see nothing really different between a scope and an app, where you still need to supply a service file and an application file, as Marty has shown before. So in this case, we've got the example of a Facebook photo scope that takes on the same format as Marty has just shown. Then next slide. So here, things that you need to bear in mind, I think nothing different, but just understanding that you need to put your application and service files into your manifest for the click, for your click manifest package, and also the permission for accounts, again, as explained before, needs to go into your AppArmor file. So as I said, we provide a more simplified C++ API for using online accounts from scope implementations. So things that you can do from this API is get your list of suitable accounts. Suitable meaning by whatever you set up your client to listen for, and the parameters you set are the service type. So say Facebook photos, the service type is sharing, as we saw in our service file. The provider will be Facebook, and your service will be the service name that you provided in your service file. Then by that information, you triangulate a couple of accounts, or you get no accounts back, in which case you can do another fancy thing, which is set one of your scope results as a requires login result.
You want to display the source code for the example, maybe, or?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So let's see the
if that helps, yeah.
Yeah, probably. Okay, so here, example in the query run method, you can see on about the 4th line of code there, we instantiate online account client class, and that's the API that I was talking about, simplified client, and the 3 parameters that I just spoke of. Your service name, the type, and your provider. This is actually for YouTube. It's fine. Then what you can do then with that object is you can get your service statuses, which is just a list of accounts that are currently using your service, and you can loop through them and check that any of them are authenticated. What we do then, or what you can do then, is if you don't have anything authenticated, you can move on to just checking if your access token is there. If your token isn't there, you can set your, just move a few lines down where we use the OA client again, about 4 lines into that if statement. OA client register account login item. There you can pass in your result item, and the result we just set up to say log into YouTube, and you need to pass through your query that's used for invalidating results. Just give it the query, don't really have to know why, but it needs it. Then your next two parameters are what to do if the login succeeds and what to do if the login fails. So there's a couple of options in an enumeration there. There is do nothing, invalidate results, continue with action. Say if it's a preview button, continue to the preview, and you can set these actions for each of those. So the nice thing about this register account login item is that it's not only for results. So the usual cases you would send a result back. In this case, that is just a login button. But you can also register widgets as account login items. So for example, in the Click Store, when you get to an app you want to install, the install button there is registered as an account login item. So when you hit the install button, it will, start up the user login prompt.
Nice.
Yeah, that's about it. So it makes things simple. That's pretty much all you need to get logged in.
Cool, thank you. Anyway, we also have references at the end of this presentation, and we've been sharing the link to it. So then you can refer to the whole APIs for QML, HTML5, and scopes, of course, which you can find online on developerubuntu.com. Then last part of the presentation, and then I guess we'll take a few questions. So online account plugins. So what are online account plugins, Alberto?
There are ways to add support for other account providers, like for instance OnCloud or any other service that you can think of that we don't support yet. So it is possible to have these online account plugins installed as a click package, and we will see how very shortly. One thing to consider is whether this is actually a good idea. In some cases, like if the account is used only by one application, one needs to consider a bit. It might just be cluttering the UI in the system settings. If the account is going to be possibly shared between many applications, then it's definitely a good candidate for being integrated in the framework.
Right. So it's not something anyway that all application providers, all application developers need to do. It's mostly if you do have a popular online service, right? Or you have your own OnCloud, as you were saying. But as we'll see anyway later, having an account provider in your application or in your package will make it more difficult for you to get it uploaded to the store, right? So the general case is more that you will use an existing provider like Facebook, Google, and so on, which are popular services people use also to authenticate with. But we provide the extra steps for popular unsupported services to also extend our system, which is quite neat.
Yeah, so let's suppose that we didn't have Facebook as a system, as a provider available in the system. So, and you wanted to ship it to add support for it in your Click application, Click package. Then there are mainly two things that need to be shipped. One is .provider file. Again, this is an XML file, and it's also documented online. But let's see, the main things here is just to have a name and an icon. And this is like the essential thing, so that it can be shown up in the online accounts UI. And then in this template element here, one can store any kind of settings that are useful for the applications who will use this account. Typically, especially in the case of OAuth, accounts where OAuth requires a lot of parameters, like the host, and then a couple of paths a couple of endpoints for the authentication, then the callback and other things. It's very convenient to store them here, so that then the rest of the account plugin is simpler, and also applications don't have to supply all these parameters again every time they authenticate. I will not go through all these settings here because they're very specific to OAuth 2, but also these are documented online. We can move on to the next slide.
Sure.
And then the other part is to actually provide the QML UI, which will be, this UI will be shown when the account has to be created and or edited. So let's see, this one is a very generic example. You have, the important things is that the root element must be applicable, and it has to have a finished signal. And when this finished signal will be emitted, the plugin will be deleted. So the UI will be closed. And here, another important thing is this account. So on inside the loader, on the source component property, you can see that we are using this account object, and this is defined in the QML context. And it is this variable here refers to an element of type account with capital A, which is, again, you can find it in the reference documentation. And here we are using its account ID property. When the account ID is 0, it means that this is a new account. Otherwise, it's some other value other than 0. So we use this, typically one would use this check to understand if the plugin has been invoked in order to create a new account or to edit an existing one. And here I'm not showing the real contents of the UI. I have a couple of components here, new account component and existing account component. They can be external QML files. That is, an account plugin can consist of many QML files if needed. We can move on to the next slide. For OAuth-based plugins, luckily there is a simpler way. So we provide a class which is OAuth main, and that basically takes care of everything. So instead of this replaces the flickable that you have seen before. You have to import this this module, Ubuntu.Online Accounts.plugin, and then you can use class. In the simplest case, you can just, when you're still debugging and developing the account plugin, you can just leave this element completely empty. So here you see that there is a creation component property. You can just remove it and have OAuth main, open braces and close braces, and it will be a valid account plugin. The only thing that
so before you dive into the complexity of that complete creation snippet, there are two questions on RC which relate to the previous example. So Ted first is asking, so does the plugin UI have to be QML, or can it connect just to mir, for example?
We load a QML file.
Right, so in this case the interface is really QML. I was going to add also,
maybe, I don't know, it might be that, I don't know how, if this is really possible, but you could ship a QML file and then inside load something else which shares the mir connection. I don't know if that's really possible.
Right, but so for example, for now the extension points rely on the UI being defined as a QML in
yes,
a QML file,
actually
right?
we load a specific file name, which is
Right.
main.qml.
Yeah. And also, I was going to add, but so this interface can be QML, or in particular can load a web view, right? Which is what we're using in a lot of cases with like Facebook and so on.
Yes,
correct. And then there was a second question. Okay, so well, and I guess that answers also Ted's remark. Then we have a question from Alexandra also about the security model of online accounts plugins. So is the QML run confined or in the same process as the online accounts main UI?
Yeah, good question. So at the moment, it's running in the same process, which is the reason why David said before that it's complicated. It's a bit complicated to ship these account plugins because you have to go through a manual review process. When you submit these plugins to the store, since they run unconfined, of course there is a risk that either they do something malicious or something just not correct, some error, and yeah, it might be. It's a good idea to have a manual review on this. We are working. We will be working in this next cycle about having this confined, so we can hopefully remove the need for the manual review process.
Yeah, or make the manual review process quicker, because we may still exercise a manual review check just to make sure that we're not getting like thousands of new online account providers for something that may not necessarily be shared with other applications.
Right.
Here, trying to be as nice as possible to developers, and if we provide an extension point, I think that's because we want people to use it and extend the system. However, we also would like to protect the user, as you were saying, Alberto. That is, if we end up with like hundreds of account types in the system, then we're not really helping things, right? At least they need to be shared between a few applications. Yeah, I think we can get back to questions just after that. So if you want to go on with the OS example.
Yes. So here, the reason why this code is so looking so scary and complicated is that if you don't have this code, so if you just have auth main without this creation component, the account will be created, but the display name on the online accounts UI will be empty. So in the list of accounts, you will just see the provider name, but not the user email or ID. And so in the case, especially when the user has multiple accounts for this provider, it becomes impossible for him to distinguish the accounts if there is no ID or email or something, screen name shown in the UI. So typically what you would want to do at the end of the OAuth authentication is to use some service-specific API to retrieve the username or some other information about the user. What we are doing here is we are instantiating this OAuth component, and it is possible to specify a complete creation function, which takes as parameter the reply from the OAuth authentication, and it can do pretty much what it wants, but typically this would try to retrieve the username. Here what we do is we use the Facebook Graph API to get information about the me user, which is the current authenticated user, and then when we receive the HTTP reply, if it is a successful reply, we pass the JSON reply, we get the username, and we store it as the display name of the account, and then we save the account. If like the default implementation of this function, just saves the account. With the, it's important to see those two lines just before the S, which is account synced connect finished and account sync. So we call account sync. The sync causes the it flushes the account database to disk. It writes all the settings, and well, in this case, it's just a display name to disk. And once we get the synced signal, which confirms that the changes have been saved, we emit the finished signal of which I spoke above. So it basically ends the account creation. And I think that's it about it. And we just cancel in case of error. We can move on if there are questions. Well, yeah. Of course, we have these two files, the .provider file and the QML file or files, and they need to be mentioned in the click manifest file. For the .provider file, it's just the usual thing. You just specify there the path of the file. But for the QML part, since there might be several files which build the UI, and of course you want to ship all of them, then you have to write here the name of the directory where they are. So it must be a subdirectory containing all the QML files that you want to be copied.
It may be worth mentioning at this point that this process of adding a new provider is the same process for scopes.
Yeah, totally. In that regard, scopes and applications are exactly the same, and they're sharing a lot of common points anyway. Yeah. Also, one scenario we even mentioned is that you can have both scopes and applications in the same click package, right? How would that work with the application and service files? So you'd have to have one for the application and one for the scope?
They could even be shared. They could even be shared.
So via the manifest, then in this case, you would reference the same file.
No, I would say, well, it depends. If the user wants, if the developer wants that its user are able to use only the application, for instance, and not the scope, like to authorize how to say, if you want that in the system settings, when you click on account and you click on the provider, like where you have the list of applications, if you want two entries there, one for the application and one for the scope, then yes, you would ship dot application and dot service file for each, one for the application, one for the scope. If you just want a single entry there, you can ship only one. In any case, since they are part of the same click package, they can access these files. So yeah, this is also something to say about account plugins. It's better to have the account plugin in the same package as the application or scope using it. It might be better. It's not necessary, but in case there are some extra data that needs to be shared between the two, because of how the confinement works, binaries which are shipped in the same click package can share more things. Like they have this .local shared directory, which is which they both can write and read from.
Which is a common space, right? Yeah. But I think that generally speaking, if people want to ship both an application and a scope, then they will want to have the same application and service file, so that from the user perspective, there is just one entity to authorize, right? Being, let's say, you're developing a YouTube service, you would just see, would you like to authorize YouTube to access your, online identity being your Google account? And then in this case, you would see both the YouTube scope and the YouTube application sharing the same identity.
Yeah, to be honest, yeah, I cannot think of a real case where the user
Where you
want
want
to
to distinguish, yeah.
If you just don't want, you just don't use the application, or you just don't use the scope. So.
Yep. Okay. Good. I think. Well, so we have a couple of online accounts references. So you can see the general guide on developerubuntu.com, the specific APIs, and some examples. You have the links here. I don't know if we have other questions. I was also inviting maybe Alexandro or Ted to join the Hangout at the end of this session. One question, so Ted was asking, which I haven't relayed, is so do you have an idea how that would work once the plugins will live in a separate process? If we take, for example, the diagram. Oops, sorry, scrolling back real quick. If we go back here, so it means that each of the orange boxes saying OA plugins, each of those would be its own process, right? Instead of living inside the sign-on UI box at the top.
That's a possibility. It may be that we can just run the sign-on UI box itself under the proper confinement. Because so these plugins are used to create an account or to edit accounts, and then like this sign-on UI is also used for the grant authorization dialog, which appears when an application is requesting access to an account. But since also that case is about a specific account type, a specific provider, like Facebook, for example, we have always one plugin. I would say I think we could easily confine even this dialog, even if there is no real need to do so. But since it's going to use only the account type for which the user has requested it, I think it's possible to avoid having a because the other alternative is to have like two trust sessions, or like two UI processes in the same trust session, and I think it is possible to skip this.
Right, because sign-on UI disappears once the graphical session is over, right?
Yes, it's very short-lived.
Right.
So I think we can confine it directly, and then it will load again the account plugin. And
right, because somehow via the trust session prompt system, you're ensuring that there is just one single instance of sign-on UI plus a plugin at the same time, right? So what you need is further ARPA locks, but
yeah, well, in theory, like if the trust session supported it, it would be perfectly normal, I think, as a use case to have like two different applications, both of which have their own trust session on, even with the same account type. So suppose that you have two applications and both want to use Facebook at the same time. I don't see why not. Why we shouldn't have two trust sessions open at the same time. Of course,
so which would
switch between the two, but
right. But so that would necessitate that you have specific processes, specific plugins, specific instances, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And I think the other use case is that you want to look up your Facebook password using your LastPass account, for instance.
Yeah.
And so you could be creating multiple accounts at the same time, or so I don't think they need to host process excuse me, that runs a plugin or something else. I'll just comment that plugins in general have been a problem for us. I know David knows this with the indicators loading into the panel service, just because it's hard to figure out who's to blame when things crash. I'm sure that David's been on more than one meeting discussing that. And so I recommend give them the whole process approach, because then they hold both pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good remark.
Okay, Alexandro, maybe I'm just checking if there are other questions. And you're using online accounts in your system, Ted, or just wondering, where in your conference you're using online accounts, if any?
So we're using libubuntu 1, so it kind of uses online accounts indirectly.
Yep.
So we don't use the API fully, and we don't actually ship any providers or what do you call them? Application
providers. Oh, okay.
Service file application.
Yeah, service file. So libubuntu 1 takes care of that for us, but it's important for us from the perspective of if we start adding other account types for purchasing things, how we start to work with those, because we have to potentially support other types of purchase that aren't necessarily just through Ubuntu Pay. And that's obviously going to need online account support, because we don't want to register those accounts more than once.
Yep.
So I guess, if do we have a little time? We have 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Can I throw another wrench in the works? The other thing we have a problem with is we need some way to identify which accounts applications can be bought with. Because it may be that you have your Ubuntu One account, obviously you could, but it could be a different account from, let's say, a carrier that would also purchasing. Is there a tags mechanism or something that we could utilize to search? Because I don't necessarily know what account I want.
So the XML file would provide, allow that, but then you need to be able to access it from the application.
So we have this thing. It's quite an advanced topic, but also like the sync monitor might use this in the future, and telepathy, for instance. Like there are a few kind of, let's say, frameworks that don't really need a specific account provider like Facebook or Google, but they just need a specific either protocol or let's say protocol, like you just want to have IMAP or XMPP, for instance, and whoever provides it, you're good to go. So yes, there is a way to do that. It's about service type is the magic keyword in this case. In the guide, which we have in the last slide, there is a short mention of it. But basically, there is a type element that your service files can have, and if so, it is possible, like, to instantiate this account service model. Instead of passing an application ID, you pass a service file. Or even better, actually, it's possible to specify the service type inside the application file. So you say that my application can use any services which are of type sharing, file sharing, or IMAP or XMPP, for instance. Okay, and then when you instantiate the account service model, you will see the list of those, if you have been authorized to use them.
So effectively, it'll filter the results for me based on my application file. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we don't install an application file because we're using libubuntu 1, but we'd have to in the future to use full online accounts.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we have to get away from using the easy library.
I don't know, because in the case of Ubuntu One, like this libubuntu One is doing much more than just the authentication using online accounts, because if I remember correctly, in online accounts they're storing like the access token and maybe something else. But then they are also taking care of renewing it if it's invalid. So I think you cannot just use online accounts directly unless, well, there is a way to do that, but it's a bit long. So they would need to implement an authentication provider for Ubuntu One, because unfortunately it's not OAuth 1.0a, it's 1.0, and we don't support it. Actually, I think it's a special kind of 1.0, so it's more tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So we may have to support still using libubuntu 1 for Ubuntu 1, but perhaps other accounts we can use.
I'm afraid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we're over. So thank you,
Yeah.
friends. Last few minutes.
Thanks everyone for this session. I think it was very interesting. So you've seen how you can quickly connect your application to online accounts, how you can connect your scope to online accounts, how you can even declare service providers, and even if you want to help Ted with the pay UI, how you can identify accounts with which you can pay. Help needed, patches welcome. See you guys online and see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Right.